Okay, I am going to kick off proceedings for the afternoon. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the launch this afternoon of the second phase of the Digital Sandbox, the pilot between the Financial Conduct Authority and the City of London Corporation. We have a lot, as you can see, that we want to talk to you about this afternoon, and we have some fantastic guests from the corporation, from the FCA, but also past participants as well, to give you a real insight into and a flavour of what being part of the Digital Sandbox is all about. The key thing I want to kind of plant in your brains at the start for all of you watching is that, as well as giving you a real insight into where we're going next with the Digital Sandbox, we really want you to start thinking about what the role and the contribution that you can play is, either as a potential participant or as a mentor, a collaborator, as a really engaged member of the ecosystem, because that's one of the key things that we have been driving at with our proposition and our hypothesis for the Digital Sandbox pilot. There'll be plenty of time at the end of today's session for Q&A, so please do use the chat bar. We will be keeping track of it as we go along, so as that question strikes you, pop it in the chat bar and we'll be curating them as we move through today's session. And I said we should have plenty of time at the end for discussion. But because we have so much to get through, I would really like to start by welcoming Jessica Rusu, who is our Chief Data Information and Intelligence Officer at the Financial Conduct Authority, who will share with us some of her opening remarks. Jessica.
Thank you, Francesca. This is really exciting, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here. As Francesca says, I am the Chief Data Information and Intelligence Officer at the FCA, and I am delighted to welcome you to the launch of the second phase of the Digital Sandbox. I think looking around the screen, I'm delighted to see the breadth and depth of professional expertise in the room. Your engagement is vital to the success of this initiative. And before I go further, I just thought it would be useful to share why we think data is fundamental to the work we do at the Financial Conduct Authority. I think we all agree that high quality data lies at the core of financial information and is the raw ingredient that drives effective decision making. It stimulates innovation, and perhaps most importantly, it increases trust in the financial services sector. So the Digital Sandbox is all about unlocking the potential for data to accelerate the development of new ideas and solutions that can tackle global challenges like the pandemic, as well as climate change. So as we approach COP26, the FCA is focused on ensuring that the financial sector plays its part in the market-led transition to a more sustainable economy. So complete, reliable, and high-quality ESG data and disclosure is the foundation of achieving this aim. So we're looking at obtaining climate-related data from different sources, both financial and non-financial information, such as weather data, such as social sentiment data, and this is becoming increasingly important in forecasting financial risks and opportunities as well across the sector. It goes without saying that we need to have the right tools and techniques in place to identify new sources of data, analyze it, communicate key information. And this iteration of the Digital Sandbox is aimed at supporting innovators to develop and validate solutions around the ESG data and disclosure, and to further explore the potential for synthetic data to positively impact financial services. In addition to the Digital Sandbox, this year the FCA is using its full suite of innovation tools to support the development of new solutions and products in the area of sustainability and climate change, and you'll see more on this from us in weeks and months to come. So I am delighted to share that in September, we will be opening applications to our Green FinTech Challenge, a package of the FCA's firm support services to help startups, incumbents, and technology providers navigate regulation and support live market testing of new products and services that will aid the transition to a net zero economy. And in October, we will be holding a tech sprint to generate new supervisory technology or soup tech ideas and ways of working to overcome challenges faced by regulators in monitoring ESG data and disclosure. In addition to nurturing a more sustainable economy, we also need to ensure that new tech innovations in the financial sector work in the public interest. As regulators, we seek to create a supportive environment for both new market entrants and incumbents. The 2020 Digital Sandbox pilot has demonstrated the potential in bringing about tailored and innovative solutions to genuine challenges presented by the pandemic through collaboration. Today, we start the next phase of this work to build, improve, and iterate based on the lessons we have learned. Your engagement is vital to the success of the Digital Sandbox initiative. Regulators and industry must work together to stimulate and inspire the development of new solutions and ideas, to combine traditional and innovative methods to generate success stories, and to support the widespread adoption of a data-led approach to innovation for better outcomes. I invite you to please think about the role you could play in supporting this initiative, and please do reach out to my team following today's event. In closing, I want to share my excitement about the solutions that will emerge from this next phase of the Digital Sandbox and their potential to enrich the market in a real and lasting way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for such a compelling overview and call to action for everybody this morning. I'd now like to introduce Damien Nussbaum, who's Director of Innovation and Growth at the City of London Corporation. Damien.
Francesca, thank you very much indeed. And Jessica, thanks for a great introduction, which I think really underlined the potential and also the need and the invitation for people to really get involved. As we know, the UK is a huge centre for innovation, whether it's financial services, legal services, insurance, research, development, new ideas constantly being created, tested to generate new services, new products and economic growth. 2019, FinTech's direct contribution to the UK economy was 5.3 billion, and it's expected to grow to 13.7 billion by 2030. So this is about this agenda, but it's also about the wider economic contribution. But while these figures are positive, our global leadership, the UK's global leadership and the competitiveness of financial and professional services is under challenge. And it's absolutely imperative that we innovate to really underline the way ahead. And one of the challenges is that innovation across sectors is sometimes done in silos. So problem statements don't match solutions, and this leads to fragmentation, duplication of tech. It can lead to increased frustration by users who become less open and more risk averse to trying new products. This siloed approach is primarily caused by fewer opportunities for players to collaborate across the ecosystem. And this barrier impacts the implementation of new ideas, the seamless digital transformation across UK's financial and professional services, and less trust from users on the retail side. To solve for this problem, we're really delighted Digital Sandbox has been created, and we're really excited to announce the second phase of this project, and particularly that the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, is driving this, and that we're working in collaboration with them. It's a great partnership, and we're really enjoying seeing already what's been achieved, but we've got very high expectations about the next phase. So the sandbox is addressing the challenge, this sense of fragmentation of silos, to innovate by clearly identifying common problem statements across financial services and relaying this demand to tech developers, providing novel features to help tech developers develop their products and accelerate time to market, bringing the ecosystem together to create a feedback loop that fosters and supports new ideas and provides opportunities for further collaboration, which is absolutely key. So we think that the sandbox will inspire new intellectual property, new ideas, using technology in novel ways to drive the market and it'll provide a safe space for industry to collaborate and guide solutions so they're of higher quality, more scalable than would otherwise be possible. Our sustainability cohort will work against the backdrop of COP26 and the UK's increasing strength in green finance. Obviously, this is going to really further mainstream sustainable finance as a core UK offer, and it will also further underpin sustainability and technology in the financial services ecosystem. And it's going to be a key part of our work at the City of London over the next few months to make sure that that sustainability offer is heard very loudly and clearly in Glasgow as part of COP and as part of a virtual programme that we're going to be running there. The sandbox, of course, is also recommended in the Khalifa review. So we're delighted that this is sort of further building on Khalifa. And it's also part of the Chancellor's wider plan for UK financial services. So we're delighted to continue this meaningful work. We're delighted to have you here for this launch event, but it's only going to count if this is not just a launch, but a spring pad for us all to be working more closely together. And so in passing on, really look forward to the ways that we can collaborate. Francesca, back to you.
Thank you, Damien. Now, I am guessing that for those of you who have joined us this afternoon, 195 of you, you are avid followers of the Digital Sandbox. But for those of you who might be coming to it for the first time, permit us to talk to you a little bit about the inception story. You know, what are we trying to create with the Digital Sandbox? What have been the lessons we have learned so far? And so I'd like to hand over to my colleague Giles French at the City of London, their External Affairs Director, to start reminding us of where we started and where we are now. Giles.
Thanks, Francesca, and good afternoon, everyone. So the Digital Sandbox model is the first of its kind in Europe, and the collaboration between the City of London Corporation and the Financial Conduct Authority is, we believe, a unique public-private partnership to support innovation. We were really proud of the success of the initial pilot, and we're very keen to build on its momentum. And since we wrapped up the pilot in March, the Sandbox has been endorsed by the Khalifa Review, where it's included as a core element of the Scale Box recommendation to support innovation in financial services. This was again underlined by the Chancellor's comments in the recent UK FinTech Week and also highlighted in the Prime Minister's Build Back Better strategy. So an innovative platform such as a Sandbox provides a real opportunity for us to support innovation, tech development, and of course maintain the UK's position as a global leader. The next stage of the project is going to be really exciting. So the mission of the Sandbox is to build a virtual ecosystem where technology companies can develop and pilot products that respond to industry problem statements and can do so in a collaborative environment with others from across the financial and professional services sector, but also beyond. So the Sandbox is a necessary space to bring together both incumbents, tech companies, academics, data scientists, government and regulators to capture an environment and address widespread market needs. Access to this type of ecosystem is one of the main challenges for tech development, and the Sandbox is important in creating that feedback loop between the problem and the solution, and linking it to design, testing, and integration. The Sandbox also addresses logistical challenges to tech development, such as data, and therefore helping early stage companies develop faster. We see this as not only benefiting innovative companies in creating and getting their solutions to market, but also benefiting financial services. It provides tools and providing tools that are developed and that can be fast-tracked through procurement and other processes. It supports financial services in nurturing innovation and maintaining competitiveness worldwide.
So let's share a little bit, shall we, about what the pilot achieved last year. So the Digital Sandbox pilot concluded in February of this year, and we have since published an evaluation report, and perhaps we can link to it in the chat, because it's a really detailed, honest set of reflections based on data, quantitative and qualitative insights from participants about how effective the Digital Sandbox has been. The key takeouts that I'd like to share with you today are that there was a clear demand for exactly the type of service that both Damien and Giles have outlined. We had 93 applications being received during the 4-week application window. The vast majority of participants, over 84% of them, reported that access to the sandbox environment had accelerated their product development, with the greatest estimated gain being between 18 to 24 months. However, there was a real spectrum of utility. Some people, and it was a minority, but important nonetheless, reported that there were more marginal benefits. These cases tended to be where participants ultimately found that the data sets provided were not sufficiently realistic or granular to meet their use case requirements, and therefore that had an impact on their ability to accelerate their product development. However, and I touched on this at the start when I talked about collaboration and engaging and participating, participants often found that they derived a lot of other benefits, particularly through collaboration with other teams or mentors and other experts. These included being able to pivot their business models or better customer understanding and product design. In general, earlier stage firms found the features of the Digital Sandbox more useful than more mature participants. Can I have the next slide, please? But what the pilot was so useful at doing is it really enabled us to get under the skin of the type of the service that firms want and how we can improve our offering. And we are making every effort to really build on this for this next iteration in this second phase. Most notably, we are focusing on one area or challenge, and Jessica talked at length about this in her remarks: ESG data and disclosure, to help us develop a really tight-knit ecosystem and focus crucially on a narrower range of data sets. One of the things I said just now was that we'd heard from participants that having a really granular, highly specified data was the key in really helping them to accelerate. We will also look to onboard participants earlier in the process so that we can better build the ecosystem around them and crucially understand their data requirements. And as I've said before, the support that the broader ecosystem can provide to this initiative is absolutely crucial. So I would again ask you to think about the role that you can play. Next slide, please. So as well as building on these lessons learned for the second phase, we are also testing out different functionalities of the platform beyond the cohort model. At the FCA, we have previously used this platform to great effect at our Women's Economic Empowerment Tech Sprint earlier this year, which was a global effort collaborating across several sites. And in October of this year, we will host our Sustainability Tech Sprint to generate new supervisory technology ideas and ways of working to overcome challenges faced by regulators in monitoring ESG data and disclosure. And the City of London Corporation will also be running separate innovation challenges using the sandbox environment. Please contact us if you'd like to find out more information about these initiatives. And please also do contact us if you want to be involved as a mentor or expert and collaborate in this space as well. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague, Matt Lowe, who's our Senior Technical Specialist at the FCA, to really talk about the use cases. Matt.
Thanks, Francesca. Sorry, I was having trouble with my mute button, as is always the case when you're in lockdown. So firstly, yeah, I just wanted to go through some of the features of the Digital Sandbox, but also talk a little bit. I mean, we've had some good background knowledge already about the sandbox already, and also speak to some of the participants who were in the first phase of the pilot, and just get some of their thoughts on how they thought the pilot went, and hear it straight from their mouth. Next slide, please. So, if anybody's actually looked at any of the artifacts that we've sent out already on the Digital Sandbox pilot, you'll see that there's some features that we explored when we were originally putting this together. And when we were speaking to industry, they were telling us that these are the core features they thought would be useful for a Digital Sandbox. So I'm just going to talk through quickly about what they are and how you can actually use them. But the first one was this access to high quality data assets. Now, we've already talked about data in some of our lessons learned, and the understanding that it's really important to get some high quality data, but also ensuring that it's useful to the use case that you're trying to solve. Now, at the moment, we've started to build an ecosystem of data. It's not just the data that we created for the pilot, but there is a combination of other data sets that are available in the Digital Sandbox. We have 110 plus data sets, and that's a combination of both synthetic and publicly available data. And then the next feature is like this integrated development environment. So there are two types of development environments here. There is a Jupyter Notebook, and that's for more experimenting with the data that's in the Digital Sandbox and trying to play with it to get a feel for what it is. So it's really good for data scientists to have a look at. And then the second is like an open IDE or some place to code. So if people want to co-code together, there's a development environment for that. And then the other feature, which is really important, was this collaborative platform. And I guess in essence, the Digital Sandbox is a collaborative platform. There are some chat features. There's some place to showcase some of your work. There's some places to communicate and also get in touch with mentors. So that all kind of comes with the package. And then there's like this observation, and that's for like other regulators, incumbents to view the participant solutions, to also get in contact with them and then get an overview of the sandbox and what's in it. We also have an application programming interface, which is, or might be known as an API marketplace. At the moment, there's about 400 plus APIs that are onboarded to the sandbox, and that's a combination of 50 companies that ranges from banks to fintechs and RegTechs. So any participants who are in the sandbox, they get access to these, to this feature. They can have a look at what the APIs that have been onboarded already and see whether that can help them with their solutions. And if anybody's interested in onboarding any of their APIs for sustainability, it'd be really useful to get in contact with us, and we'll see how we can accommodate that. Next slide, please. So data, yeah, as we're well aware, data is one of those features that everybody's really keen to get their teeth stuck into. We did do a lot of work in some data generation for the previous pilots. We did a data sprint. It was quite a lot of lessons that we learned from that process and how we can do that a little bit more efficiently. We've started to establish like a working group to help build out these data sets for sustainability and make them as much as possible reflection of the real economy and that ecosystem. And we're going to, this time around, we think what we'll probably do is we'll work with the participants who are successful in getting into the sandbox and on their particular requirements. Because as we find out, each team will have their own specific requirement, and the earlier we can get them engaged with the data, the more opportunity we have to try and create it specifically for them. So they're kind of the features and the data, and I thought I'd just right now like to invite two participants from the previous Digital Sandbox, and they can sort of talk us through the features and how they found them. And the first person that we have up is Alexis. She's the founder and CEO of Fraud Doctor. And within the sandbox, they developed a solution called Shota Signal Analytics, which is a software as a service solution that produces risk scores on organizations for early warning of financial fraud and mismanagement. The Shota engine performs powerful reviews of corporate financials and produces Shota scores that signal the trustworthiness of that financial data. She's also architected and led global fraud mismanagement programs from the largest of a European conglomerate with 165,000 employees to the first in the world in war zones of developing countries. Alexis is the Global Chair Emeritus of the Board of Directors for the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and has spent a career creating a blueprint from how fraud is investigated and the risk for it is managed around the world. So thank you very much for joining us, Alexis.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and the second person that we have on the panel is Reeve, who's the CEO and co-founder of Lextego. Lextego is a fintech which is building on an open source transaction monitoring platform to support the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's program of accelerating financial services for the poor. Based on the premise that the detection of fraud and money laundering is a shared problem, the solution Actio that they developed within the sandbox creates a strong starting point for any fintech in the world, but confidently can support a nation's transactions. So Rob has a background of 14 years of working in fintech space across more than 40 countries, working for some of the largest telcos in the world. Rob has also worked on innovations in the payment space in developing markets before moving into open source software. So Rob is the acting coup at a fintech unicorn in the Netherlands as well. So thanks for joining us, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you. So the first question that I've got is, I mean, we've been talking about data a fair bit already, but what I'd want to know is get your reflections on the synthetic data and how important that was as a feature, and how was your experience with it, and what do you think it could be improved with? So maybe I'll just start with Alexis.
Sure. So we found for our solution that the synthetic data was actually insufficient for us to meaningfully answer our test questions. But this was due to two reasons. First, the majority of solution providers analyze transaction level data, which is where the synthetic data was focused. But our solution uses financial filings of publicly listed companies. So you can think of it as sort of the culmination of all of those transactions. And we're looking at the story that emerges from analyzing that publicly available data. And second, in essence, solutions look for human manipulation when we're talking about fraud. So when you try to analyze synthetic data in the context of fraud parameters, the design process itself of that synthetic data is manipulation, and that skews the results of the testing. And we also found that no fraud expert was consulted when the synthetic data was created. And that means that it actually did not represent real world conditions, because out of the 114 core fraud schemes, really only a handful of them were sprinkled in. And most importantly, there was no key provided. And by this, I mean that there was no holdback set for us to be able to test against, leaving us no way to know if in fact we had found all of the data in the fraud or not. So given all of this, my suggestion would be to use real world data. So in our case, we use data that's published by the company, so there's no privacy issue for us to contend with. But I think that data at the entity level is not an individual. But for those of us that do bounce up against PII, if they're testing for fraud identification, it'd be better to use real data that's masked. So some could argue that a sophisticated person could reverse engineer it and identify the individual. But I would ask you to balance that against the greater good. Do you really want the first time that these innovations see real data is when it's actually deployed inside a bank or other organizations? And they can't effectively train their solution before then. And I wonder, why would anybody trust a company less now during development than later when you buy their solution? So isn't the goal to actually be effective and get the job done? The sooner that they can analyze real data, the sooner that solutions can be deployed to mitigate fraud risk.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I guess synthetic data is it's a really difficult thing to try and combat. How do you build synthetic data that actually meets those requirements? There's so many different requirements, and there's so many different features that you can try to take into account, and it gets even more difficult the number of use cases that you have. So I guess the problem that we're always going to come up against is how do we get access to that real data? And handling real data is also problematic, from a GDPR point of view and a risk point of view. But I think where the Digital Sandbox is trying to come in at this point in time is saying, okay, well, here's a starting point. You can test your proof of concept, and you can test that with some synthetic data, and then give you that sort of leverage to try and start to speak to people getting access to either anonymized data or real world data. So it's something I think, I agree, we need to work on it. What I really liked though, Alexis, was how you were adaptable and able to pivot to real data at short notice. I think that's a really good learning as well. So you don't always need to lean so heavily on the data sets in the sandbox. You should always seek to find other data sets that can help you, with your build where you can. And that's something I think the team would always be there to do. It's not just about the data that's in the sandbox. How can we actually just innovate within that environment? So thank you, Rob. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, we're at a different point in our journey. We're at the very early stages. The company didn't exist before September of last year. So we were fortunate to get in very early on. And our challenge from the Gates Foundation was they wanted us to test at volume and at speed. So basically throwing 3,000 transactions per second at 35 milliseconds, to throw some technical stats for those who are interested. We were able to go beyond that, but the data, the volume of data was the important part for us. And now we're getting beyond that. We started to look, you did actually help us accelerate our own thinking on synthetic data. I agree with Alexis that it's too late when you get to the real world to be testing your platform. You need to have tested it before then. But I think that's one of the things that the iterations of the sandbox should be looking on. How do we make the synthetic data more and more realistic? We've taken that burden on a little bit because we're an open source project. We're building on top of your data set. We've now built fake transactions for the 7 million users and the 65,000 businesses you've got. We've created a year's worth of transactions for each of those. And we'll be feeding that back to you guys. But that for us was the more important part. We got that acceleration on thinking of synthetic data, how that applies in each given context. And we've now pulled in a data scientist a lot earlier in our journey than we planned because of the pilot. And that thinking is helping us making the data more realistic. How do we create that modeling and start getting better and better? Because synthetic data for fraud, it's you need the single needle, but you need a lot of hay is the terminology we're using. We've got the needle. Where's the haystack? You need both. It's a bit of a challenge.
And sometimes creating the haystack is just as hard as creating the needles.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was great. The thing that I enjoyed about watching how you guys use the data is that it was being created, and then you started to build on something that's specific to your requirements. And what I also like is your comments about how you start to make synthetic data generation more open source and continue to build that out in the original data sets, and that starts to create something that can actually be fed back into the ecosystem. Eventually it's great to hear that whatever you come up with is a synthetic data set that has some of those fraud typologies that we don't necessarily have had before. We can feed that back into the ecosystem. That could become useful for some other innovators further down the line. So yeah, that's really good. The other question I had was, and I'm going to ask Alexis first, was how has your solution progressed into the Digital Sandbox? Did the Digital Sandbox help accelerate the development of your solution?
Absolutely. I mean, we started at a spreadsheet level, and by the end of the sandbox, it was rapid prototyping, rapid failing, if you will, and we learned from that. And so during the sandbox, we tested Shota, and at that time, we were 85% effective. And further tuning now has us about 90% effective. And what that means is that we can find 90% of the material misstatements out of 33,000 restatement impact years. We still have not started with machine learning yet because we've been building out the rest of the schemes. So during the sandbox, we only had algorithms for the top 7 financial statement fraud schemes. So these were the ones with the highest probability. And since the sandbox, we've completed the algorithms for the rest of the financial fraud schemes. So now we have coverage for 95% of them, and we're finalizing the commercial build now. So we're adding some features that a few of the US regulators had requested for SUTEC. And lastly, we documented all of the algorithms and mapped out use cases for fintech, capital markets, to legal tech, to GRC, and even ESG.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good news as well. From what I'm hearing is that you're able to develop the effectiveness of solution by a further 5%, which probably doesn't sound like too much of a leap, but I think when you're talking about when you're developing these type of solutions, that last 5 to 10% on a scale of 95% is actually a big leap, and it's very exponential. So to actually get that extra 5%, I think is right at the top end of that spectrum, and it has helped you develop that a bit further. Rob, how did you find it?
Yeah, when we went in, we were looking, as I say, to get to volume. So we were aiming at 3,000 transactions per second, but we were able to get up to 10,000. But you go through 1 million records very quickly. So hence the data provided by the FCA and COLC really did make that a lot easier to be able to throw so much at it. We thought there would be a few, everyone talks about hockey sticks and where is that curve where you suddenly hit the point. We were able to spot those, and we redesigned. We had a database, a standard database in there, and we pivoted and basically put in a relational that moved to a graph database now to actually make that easier. But we saw the tail dropping off on our testing, that the more data we threw, the slower it was getting. We're running that test again in a few months. We've now re-architected key components, so we can actually pull all those in. So in the next few weeks, we're heading to hopefully go towards 10,000 TPS, and this time we won't see the drop off that we saw during the pilot.
So is that fair to say that you wouldn't have seen those bottlenecks, and you would have introduced that graph database implementation without the actual use of the data that you had access to and
yeah,
the environment.
Theoretically, we thought it was there, but the testing actually pushed it and said, yeah, it's there. You couldn't miss it. You saw a drop off in our capacity, and we were able to say, yeah, it was definitely where we thought it would be. We're trying to push beyond the 10,000, so we're going to see more bottlenecks. But now we've got the data, we can do that. So it's that challenge of where do your capacity problems come in, and that's what we were trying to achieve. So that was useful.
Thank you. All right, I know it's been a bit Rob heavy, but I'm going to ask you this last question first, and I'm going to switch back to Alexis. But can you just talk a little bit about how the sandbox allowed you to collaborate with other participants and subject matter experts within the platform?
Yeah, we're in a strange place being open source. That all of our code and our IP is basically being funded by the Gates Foundation and publicly available. We've got nothing to hide; everything's there, which made our conversations a little easier because we can go up to talk to anybody and say, "Talk about your solution. How can we help? What can we learn?" Everyone else is going, "That's mine. That's my IP." So there's that challenge that you've got to work through. So establishing those relationships, we found. With some of the privacy enhancing technology teams, we had a completely different mindset and a different strategy and solution. So we're able to talk openly and collaborate more easily with those guys. And that's helped us in our journey as well to say, okay, privacy enhancing technology wasn't really on our radar. Now it's front and center. How do we build this and start the collaboration that's needed without breaching all of this data? Because the synthetic data is one element. But in the real world, that engagement as well also requires interactions without the sharing of real data. So the pet stuff was really useful to interact with some of the guys from that perspective. And the workshops that were facilitated by COLC and the FCA, they were a little bit late, and it's good to hear you're bringing them forward this time. It was the equivalent of speed dating. That's where we found out, oh, that's what you do. Yes, I would like to talk to you. And we've established some working relationships after the fact. And we've now working closely with some of the people that were in those mentor groups that if we'd got those earlier, might have had a bit of a difference. But it was great to at least have that opportunity and to see the benefits of that now.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I found it really difficult doing this remotely. If this was in a pre or maybe in a post-COVID world, we would organise some events in person. We have boot camp and that's in person. We would organise some other workshops. And I think this time around, we just need to maybe be a little bit more creative because we're not quite out of COVID yet, and how we get people to connect as quickly as possible. How about you, Alexis?
For us, we were fascinated by some of the other solutions. At first, we wanted to talk to the other founders just to understand what they were working on. So it was a bit of a nerd session, really. But when we talked with them, it became clear that Shota could enhance their product offering. And with others, we saw that their data, or with one, their process, could enhance our offering. So we found some really nice synergies there. We also reached out to the people that built the synthetic data and helped us understand at that moment, once we understood how they built it, that was our decision to pivot and to use live data instead. We were given access to the Turing Institute to talk to them about some really interesting data considerations. We talked with the Information Commissioner's Office to validate our understanding that none of our inputs were considered PII and that privacy was not an issue for us, unless we get down to a micro entity where the name of the company is also the name of the owner. And that was really helpful for us to understand. We talked with John Ho of Standard Charter, and he provided insights into what features financial institutions would need. And every single week we met with the FCA and the COLC and had really candid and insightful discussions from the regulators and economic development's perspective. And that was incredibly helpful. So all of these conversations were meaningful and they helped us progress faster than we would have otherwise. I highly, highly recommend reaching out and making those kinds of connections as soon as possible. It's one of the key benefits of participating in the sandbox.
Yes, thank you for that. Again, it's about speaking to people as soon as possible, be it mentors, other team members, FCA, City of London, people who generated the data, just getting that sort of collaboration happening as soon as you can. I guess the collaboration aspect of the platform is really important. It's about connecting the ecosystem. It's about learning as much as you can from the ecosystem, and it's about sharing with the ecosystem. So that's it for us. Thank you so much for your time, Alexis and Rob. And it's been really good to get your time throughout the pilot and the insights you've actually got from the first phase, and actually sharing that with some maybe future participants in Sandbox. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll be handing back to Francesca.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, Rob. That was really, really rich and interesting. And gave a real flavour to people who are maybe thinking about kind of putting in an application of what it's been like. But now on to the use cases for the sustainability cohort. It is fair to say we have spent the last few months really engaging with industry, with academia and innovators to identify the market challenges and opportunities, as Jessica mentioned earlier, that could be best addressed by the features of the Sandbox. We've distilled this down to 3 key areas to support the transition to net zero: ESG data and disclosures, voluntary carbon markets, and sustainable debt instruments. But our challenge was to select the use cases which, if solved, would have the most impact on innovation in financial services and address those high priority market challenges. So I am very happy to announce that there are 3 use cases for this second phase of the Digital Sandbox, and I'm going to just share them with you now. So the first is, how can technology enable transparency in disclosure and reporting on sustainability, especially on the characteristics of corporate assets and the profile of their supply chains? For example, open source and eco-friendly decentralized ledgers, centralized platforms. The second use case: how can technology be used to automate the assurance of a listed issuer's ESG data and validation of its ESG labeled corporate bond issuance? And finally, how can technology help consumers understand the ESG characteristics of the products and providers they engage with, as well as provide visibility around alternatives aligned with their needs and preferences? We will be opening up applications in September to innovative firms with solutions that can tackle these challenges, and we really look forward to speaking to interested firms in the run-up to the application window opening. I am now going to introduce Jana Mcintosh, who is Managing Director of Payments and Innovation at UK Finance, to reflect on these use cases and talk to us about why she thinks these are such important challenges. Jana.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Francesca, and to the FCA and the City of London Corporation for both this initiative, but inviting me to contribute to the dialogue and the discussion today. It is such a kind of hugely important initiative, as highlighted by all the previous speakers, and has been kind of emphasized and brought to the front in all of the reports that we've seen around kind of fintech, but more importantly as well to kind of support the sustainability agenda, which is such a fantastic cause and purpose to kind of try and kind of put technology and innovation to the test. So it is initiatives like this which, as kind of Giles said in the beginning, to build this ecosystem, the whole kind of purpose around this, to bring people together, to share ideas, to facilitate the thinking, to explore the topics, to advance the agenda. I mean, for all of this reason, being able to build this ecosystem around this agenda, around kind of fintech, is an absolutely fantastic opportunity to accelerate what we've done and the agenda that's being built around this. And as this agenda grows, and it's growing really quickly, there's an increasing need, as we've just heard from the previous speakers as well, there's an increasing need for companies to access, to assess, to share, to disclose all the data on this kind of topic, but ultimately actually to use this information and data to take action against climate-related topics and risks and opportunities as they emerge. And it's these actions really that should provide customers and shareholders with the information they need to manage financial risks and climate-related matters. And so that's really where that third use case comes to life, is where it is that we can use innovation to help support these actions from kind of customers and investors and companies, because without action, we're not really going to advance the agenda. But it's really clear, though, that there's a notable lack of reliable, consistent and comprehensive data to kind of help inform these actions. And I think in the beginning, Jessica talked about the trust that we can build around this. And I think this is where that reliability on the data becomes increasingly important. And that's really the use case one, where it is that engagement with the industry and discussions that we have had both at UK Finance and across this topic. This is probably the one area where we have focused the most, and where it is that people are focusing their time and attention. And the technology really kind of comes to life here, which is we can use the innovation, we can use the technology to kind of help build the ways in which we do this. Whether it's through open source platforms like Rob was talking about, whether it's APIs, whether it's portals, the technology is going to play an absolutely key role for us in being able to enable this. And importantly also to kind of think about the standards that we need to develop to kind of help do this in a consistent way, to kind of help stakeholders understand and kind of make these informed decisions and take action on the back of it. So I think that kind of first use case really is kind of, I think, going to be an area where it is that there's going to be a huge amount of interest, but I mean, so important and kind of so relevant, and absolutely great kind of focus to have. And we've already kind of seen within some of the kind of work that we've done, you know, verticals emerging within this. It is such a big topic, clearly, but there's some really good use cases already emerging, for example, around real estate and unsecured lending and other areas. So no doubt that some of these will come to life and some of the work that we will do within this initiative. And then similarly, around kind of the second use case, there's an increasing conversation around ESG rating agencies, and we know the FCA is kind of looking into that as well. It is very influential, but again, kind of how it is that we develop methodologies, how we use the data, how we kind of can create a bit more variability, or less variability, should I say, and the results, I think will kind of help advance kind of the use case around ESG labeled corporate bond issuance. And so it'd be really interesting to kind of see how it is that the technology and the kind of fintechs will kind of think about resolving and kind of solving some of those related issues. So we think it's fantastic to bring fintech into this conversation, and I think this is innovation with purpose, and I think everyone can get behind it. So personally, I'm really thankful to kind of be part of the advisory panel. Really proud to kind of be part of the initiative, and as UK Finance, we'll kind of do our best to kind of bring to bear our members and the involvement to start helping the FCA and the City of London Corporation to build the ecosystem. So thank you very much for that, and kind of really pleased to be part of it.
Thank you, Jana, and we will absolutely be taking you up on your offer to mobilise your ecosystem. Expect that offer to be firmly taken up. Giles, can I hand over to you to round us out before we go to Q&A? So this is my last call. If you have burning questions, please use the chat. Giles will probably pick up a few of the questions already asked in his comments that he'll round us out with, but we will also come back to any that he hasn't answered, and if you do have any more, please pop them through now. Giles.
Thanks, Francesca. So yeah, so now we've selected the sustainability use cases. We're going to be focused on getting the cohort up and running. So we want to make you aware of a few key steps over the coming weeks. Applications for companies looking to participate in the sustainability cohort will open in September. This is for those with a proof of concept they're looking to develop. And we're going to publish the eligibility criteria soon. And the applications you'll be able to make online. There'll be an online form for you to complete. We'll then review those applications. We'll select and notify the successful participants by the end of October. Then, in time for COP26 in November, we'll open the sandbox to the selected cohort with an initial focus on the collaboration space and networks. We will work with participating teams to develop the data sets and ensure that they meet their needs. And then we'll be bringing in industry experts to explore the use cases. In January, the teams will get full access to data for the purpose of testing and validating their solutions. Participants will continue to work on developing their proofs of concept, and will welcome further opportunities for collaboration with other members of the industry. And then the cohort will wrap up in March with a demo day. This is just a quick representation of the stages I've talked you through. And most importantly, there are several ways that you can get involved in the sustainability cohort and with the sandbox. So first, if you have an early stage solution to one of these use cases, you can apply to participate in the sandbox. and use its features to develop your idea. Second, if you have expertise in innovation, sustainability, or financial services, you can volunteer as a mentor. And I think I've seen someone's already put their hand up in the chat box there to do so, and that's fantastic to see already. So last year we had leaders who shared their guidance on business models, data science, procurement, privacy, and a range of other issues. Third, we're looking for help solving the data question and either identifying real-life data sets for public use or creating one-of-a-kind synthetic data sets. This is, as you will all know, a very complicated task, and the data will underpin much of the cohort's development, so it's crucial we get that right. Fourth, you can participate as an observer and collaborate with the teams, whether it's through messaging tools, attending the demo days, or identifying other opportunities for discussion. And finally, registration to the platform is open, and I encourage you to visit digitalsandboxpilot.co.uk to sign up for updates. So, and if you have any questions about the process, you can contact us at, I should say, digital.sandbox@fca.org.uk. And you can also register to the Digital Sandbox platform to receive updates. And I think it's really important that if you are interested in this process, do sign up to the platform, do sign up for the updates, because that is the best way to stay informed and to know when different bits of information and opportunities arise. So here are a few links you may wish to save. The first is a link to the Digital Sandbox itself. Second is a link to our lessons learned report, and I think that's also been put in the chat box. And this evaluates the pilot and makes recommendations for the second phase. Third, a link to the relevant part of the Financial Conduct Authority's website. And finally, and I do encourage you to look at this, particularly those of you new to the process, there's a link to the pilot's final demo day. So each team had 8 minutes to present their solution and answer questions, and all of this is now available on YouTube. We're also, don't worry if you didn't manage to get all that down, we're going to upload a recording of today's event and the slides as well. So all the information on the slides and from today's discussion will be available. So that's enough for me. Just wrapping up now, and thank all of you for joining us today and to listen to the panel and discussion. We've now got a bit of time for Q&A. So Francesca, I'll hand back to you.
Well, I'm actually going to come straight back to you, Giles. So we've had a question we've had two questions, one from Fiona, one from Alan. I was wondering about the application process. I was wondering if you could pick up those questions. Let me know if you want me to read them out to you or whether you've got them in front of you.
Thanks. I think I'm aware of what they are, but I think there's two elements. One, I think was a question around whether individuals or groups of individuals can apply, and frankly, either. It's fine. But the important thing is that there is a single coherent proposition for us to assess. So that could be one individual putting in the application, or it could be a team of people. The other key points, just to repeat what I think I said towards the end, is that the details on how the applications will work will follow, but it'll all be online, so it'll be a sort of template online form for you to apply. So hopefully, I think someone else was asking about how the ease of the process, but it'll all be pretty simple to do online.
Thank you. We've had a question as to, will there be a RegTech cohort? John, perhaps I can come to you to answer that question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Francesca. I mean, I think it's a good question. We see certainly 2 of the 3 use cases as having RegTech applications. So, you know, when we talk about RegTech, we talk about technology or new solutions that help firms comply with regulation. And I certainly see that this use case has the potential for RegTech firms to get involved and to certainly apply.
Thank you very much. And whilst I've got you, keep your camera on, John. I'm going to come back to you. We had a question about kind of building a minimum viable product. So I was wondering if you could just, for the benefit of colleagues on the call, explain the distinction between the Digital Sandbox and the Regulatory Sandbox.
Yeah, sure. So the Digital Sandbox in its current guise really is aimed at providing kind of support to accelerate the development of solutions at a kind of an early stage, so at a proof of concept stage or an ideation stage. It fits the way we see it as fitting into the broader kind of regulatory suite of innovation services. It's a stepping stone into something like a regulatory sandbox. So the FCA's regulatory sandbox provides, support or guardrails or waivers to permissions for firms really looking to test an established product that's already in the market on consumers. So that's the distinction. So the Digital Sandbox is looking at that entry and initial scale, whereas something like a regulatory sandbox really looks to give you the opportunity to test your products in a real life scenario and providing regulatory support around that.
Thank you very much, John. We've had a couple of requests, more than questions, from academics, PhD students asking if you can get involved. Absolutely, we would really welcome your participation, either as part of teams or as mentors, expert advisors. So please do register. You will see how to do this as part of the web pages that Giles shared earlier, and we would really welcome your participation. Can I come to Matt? We've had a few questions on data and the use cases, asking about specificity of data, further detail. Can you pick those up for us?
Yeah, I guess the data for this.
Oh, you need to put your headpiece down, your mouthpiece down. There we go.
Sorry. All right, so many rookie mistakes today. Yeah, so the data that we're building for this cohort, we actually are doing another event at the FCA, which is on a tech sprint, but I don't want to sort of focus our attention on that at the moment. We're starting to create some data on sustainability use cases, which will be very similar to the use cases that we are working on here, but maybe have more of a sub-tech type of angle on it. Now, the idea is that we will start to build on those data sets and as I said before, try to build them specifically around the requirements of the teams that are successful in getting into the sandbox.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. So we are going to wrap there, I think. Thank you very much for all your questions. Thank you very much to all our participants for joining us this afternoon, all our speakers for your time and for sharing your insight and experiences. It's been a really rich session. A final request, I think, from the team at the FCA and City of London is to register, explore, sign up. Whether you're a team, an organisation, whether you're an academic or an interested expert, please do register to get involved, to collaborate. As I said, we will be taking Jana up on her offer as well to really mobilise her networks. And one of the things we really learnt last time was the data is hugely important. How to specify it, to get it really right, for it to be of maximum utility is key. But also key is really getting a broad range of engagement to build that ecosystem, to build that network for collaboration. I will leave you with a reminder of our contact details to please get in touch with the team at digital.sandbox@fca.org.uk. But at this point, I will sign off and thank you again very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.